Hello, I'm Boase-Beier.
And I'm Marian de Vooght.
And we're going to give a very short reading from a book of Holocaust poetry. It's entitled Poetry of the Holocaust, an Anthology. It's this book, and it was published last year by Art Publications. It's edited by the two of us. And in the poems that follow, if they're translated by us, we won't say that. We will only mention the translator if it's translated by somebody else. So the first poem is by Rosa Ausländer, and it's called Snow. And this is a poem that was written in German. Ausländer was born in Czernowitz in 1901. That at the time was part of Austria-Hungary. It's now in Ukraine. She was born into a German-speaking Jewish family, and for several years during the war, she was forced to live in the Czernowitz ghetto. In the poem Snow, which follows, she's simply anticipating the events that seem as though they're going to happen. Snow. Snow falls. The world turns white. In the sun, that white glitters in every colour. White stars blossom in the air. On the horizon, beyond the mountains, look, Snow White and the seven dwarfs. At night, the white is black, black as the dark queen beyond the mountains.
The next poem I will read is Pogrom by Ed Hoornik, and it's translated from the Dutch. Hoornik wrote Pogrom on the 12th of November in 1938, 2 days after Kristallnacht. In the poem, Hoornik mentions Grenadierstraat, which is a Jewish shopping district in Berlin, and he compares that in his mind to where he is in Amsterdam. Hoornik's work as a journalist and poet was banned from 1942 onwards, when the Nazis took over the newspaper he worked for. The following year, he was arrested for publishing illegally. He was imprisoned in Camp Vooght in the Netherlands and then deported to Dachau in 1944. Pogrom. Is that the moon whose last quarter I can see, or a face veiled in smoke and flame? Where is Berlin, and where Grenadier Street? What did the boy do when the mob came? Is that his shadow standing at the river? Is this the water that took him in? This here the Spree, Grenadier Street over there? It is the Amstel. It is Amsterdam. On Rembrandt Square, the sheen of the lamps. Over the roofs, a fountain of light shines. I press my nails deeper into my hands. Jodenbrae Street is a deep ravine. Between the walls, a brief scream sounds. It's only 10 hours by rail to Berlin.
The third poem is by Dagmar Hillerova, and it's called Windy Night. It's translated from the German by Philip Wilson, although it was originally written in Czech. Hillerova wrote this poem when she was a teenager in the Terezín ghetto, and the original poem in Czech was never published, and there wasn't much interest in publishing her poetry after the war. So it was first published in German. That was a version translated from the Czech by Rudolf Iltis and Günther Dijker, and that German translation is the basis for the translation into English by Philip Wilson. Windy night. Windy night. Under window eyes the alley flows, furrowed by the hot tracks of the human herd. Landscape, forgive. On our shoulders we bear your sorrow too. We go, our eyes gouged out by submission to fate, each burdened with their own. windy night. Even the moon does not make a dog whimper. No star fulfills our wish by its fall, like a bird with wounded wings, to lie down and not to wait for morning.
I'm going to read a poem by Catherine Vooght called My God, which was translated from the French by Timothy Addis. The poem was written in Ravensbrück, where Roux was imprisoned from 1944 until the end of the war as a member of the French resistance. Before her deportation, Roux had been imprisoned in Fresnes, which she also refers to in the poem. My God, after the search on arrival at Ravensbrück, 22nd of April 1944. My God, I've no clothes on me now, I've no shoes. I've no bag, no note case, no pen. I've no name. I've been labelled 35282. I've no hair, I've no hanky. I've no photos of mother and my nephews now. I've not got the anthology from which every day in my cell in Fresnes I learned a poem. I've got nothing now. My skull, my body, my hands are naked. Bosh, search, strip, rob, shave, degrade my person. Arm my hands with shovels and pickaxes. Make me into a woodcutter, a ditch digger, a tipper of excrement, a snow sweeper, a convict labouring in the bog. Sculpt my face, my wrinkles, my body, so I look like thousands on thousands of woman prisoners. Give my eyes that frightening fixed glare that I often see with horror in the eyes of my companions. Deafen my ears with your shouting, wield your bludgeon, kick with your booted feet. Murderous, pile our starved bodies by day and night into your crematoria. Show our eyes the inhuman spectacle of women dying like animals, there in a corner, without ever stopping, beat, wound, hang, shoot. Gosh, since childhood, my country, which is France, has clothed me with wool of its sheep, flax of its fields, silk of its insects. My country, which is France, has spread above me the gentleness, the tenderness, the calm of its sky. In my heart, hated criminal bush, wild beast still slobbering our blood, it has put a love so deep that in this place, imprisoned, unarmed, mother naked, I feel rich as a queen, and I hold up my head with pride.
I'm now going to read a poem by the German poet Werner Dürssen. He was born in 1932 and he died in 2008. And he writes in this poem about the fate of people with disabilities, 10,654 people who were brought to Grafeneck Castle from various care institutions in the southwest of Germany. They were brought there and they were murdered in a gas chamber which had been newly built specifically for that purpose. And so this was the first location of the so-called euthanasia program, which aimed to get rid of people who were deemed life unworthy of life. Grafeneck. Reaching upwards, limes, horse chestnuts, airy avenue, the sky pristine blue, unhindered view to hilly distances. I see, you see, the spring is mild. No fluttering tape in the wind, no breath, nothing rises from the meadows. I ask, you ask, who carted the souls up there? 10,000 times delivered bread to worthless eaters. They don't starve for long. I feel, you feel, the spring is soft. Upwards, through limes, horse chestnuts, the smoke plume high. Who turned the tap on, stoked the fire, threw them in? Who washed their hands with soap? It did not scream, did not foam. Sleep, lovely sleep. 10,000 times, you see, the spring is blind. I ask, you ask, no one knows. Black, fluttering in the wind. The sky greyer than grey. Who shoved the slack to one side, swept the ashes into a pile? Who dug the ditch, sowed the grass? I hear, you hear, the witnesses do not talk. The spring is sly. Closely drawn in, the rose, limes, horse chestnuts, lovely avenue, the sky pristine clear. No fluttering tape in the wind, no hair, solid green, nothing rises from the meadows. The birds twitter, the spring is blue.
I'm going to read a poem by Ida Gerhard, The Rejected Gift. The Dutch poet Ida Gerhard had many Jewish friends who were murdered, and she felt guilty because of this. Gerhard suffered lifelong regret for having signed, under pressure, an Aryan declaration in 1941 to keep her job as a classics teacher. Anne Frank's statue mentioned in the poem, made by Pieter de Hond, was placed on Jan Skerkhoff Square in the city of Utrecht in 1960. Flowers are laid there all year round. The Rejected Gift. It was winter and the city wrapped in dusk. I meant to walk across Jan Skerkhoff, really just to lay some flowers I had intended for Anne Frank. I had already taken the paper off, but stepped back. The statue on the square in this twilight was alive and stared at me, and her silent lips wanted to speak to me, while, unmoving, I just kept standing there. Nothing disturbed this untemporal encounter, until I heard her wordless accusation. She, a Jewish child, hurt by all the centuries before. You were with them, even now that she is no more.
The final poem we're going to read is The Urns by Angela Fritzen, a German poet. And Fritzen is a writer and journalist. She was born in Bonn in 1974. She has Down syndrome, and she wrote this poem as part of an exhibition in the Bundeskunsthalle in Bonn in 2016. It was an exhibition that told the story of people with Down syndrome, and it also had a section on the fact that they were murdered by the Nazis. The urns, turned into ash, sand, the urns, to have strength. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.